The Vietnam War, a conflict that lasted from 1955 to 1979, is widely recognized. However, there are lesser-known facts about this period of history that are worth exploring. The war affected civilians greatly. International law has measures and regulations to prevent injuries and deaths to civilians. However, innocent civilians often pay the price for war. The Vietnam War was a conflict between the North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, the South Vietnamese, and the United States of America. Civilians on both sides of the conflict were killed. In 1995, Vietnam came to fully understand the extensive civilian casualties during the war. More than 2 million civilians from both the North and South were killed, along with over 1 million soldiers from all armies involved. The Vietnam War resulted in a legacy of unexploded bombs. The Vietnam War was mainly fought between North and South Vietnam, but its impact extended beyond their borders. Laos and Cambodia were also heavily involved in the conflict, resulting in significant civilian casualties. Laos, in particular, is believed to have the highest per capita rate of unexploded cluster bombs in the world. The United Nations included an additional goal for Laos in the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals to eliminate dangerous unexploded items from the country. The Vietnam War began in an effort to unify the country. The communist government governed the North, while the government in the South sought to align itself further with the West. Before the Vietnam War, there were 2 separate governments in the country. The Vietnam War began as a civil war, with the northern government seeking to unite the country and create a united Vietnam by bringing the North and South together. The North sought help from the Viet Cong in the South, while the South enlisted the support of the United States of America. In 1975, the fall of Saigon marked an important milestone, and the North was finally able to reunite the country with Hanoi as its capital. Vietnam resisted French rule. France colonized Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, which became known as French Indochina. In 1945, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam came into power and sought independence from France. The northern Vietnamese government aimed to unite the country and establish a communist state, causing concern in the West about the spread of communism. France and Japan were worried that, if one country became communist, others would follow. In 1950, the United States supported the French army by sending aid and backing South Vietnamese troops. The United Nations held a conference in Geneva in an attempt to establish peace. In 1954, the United Nations in Geneva convened to discuss the peaceful withdrawal of the French from Vietnam. 2 years later, in 1956, a general election was scheduled to unite the country democratically, instead of through warfare. However, the United States opposed holding a general election in Vietnam due to their fear that the Communist Tea Party in the North would win. The Viet Cong was not established until 1960. They were a party from the South that supported the North and plagued the South with guerrilla warfare. The United States aimed to assist South Vietnam in their endeavors. In March 1965, the North Vietnamese fired on 2 U.S. Navy ships. President Lyndon Johnson decided to step up efforts to help South Vietnam defeat the North. Historians note that the United States did not aim to take over Vietnam, but rather to provide enough support for the South Vietnamese army to defeat the North Vietnamese communists. During the late 1960s, the United States did not invade the North or cause further damage through attacks. Instead, they focused on South Vietnam and how to support the Southern troops' efforts. The Vietnam War involved extensive guerrilla warfare. The Viet Cong heavily used guerrilla warfare to support the northern government. They did this by making it difficult for their enemy to find them, and by setting up hundreds of booby traps that would cause injury and death to their opponents. Making it difficult for the enemy to find their opponents was one of the main tactics of guerrilla warfare. The result was anger and frustration on the part of many enemy troops in the South, a lack of awareness of who their enemies were, and a loss of trust in their neighbors. President Nixon did not want to go to war. In 1969, when Richard Nixon became President of the United States, he aimed to withdraw U.S. troops from Vietnam and let the Vietnamese soldiers take over the fighting. However, the move to invade Laos and Cambodia was met with disapproval from many U.S. citizens, leading to protests throughout the country. The war was eventually won by North Vietnam. Although the Vietnam War is widely known, not everyone is aware of its conclusion. Despite peace talks in Paris, the fighting in Vietnam persisted until the South surrendered to the Communist North in 1975. This was partly due to the withdrawal of United States troops 2 years prior, which left the South too weak to continue on its own with any significant strength or power to overcome the enemy. By 1976, Vietnam had been unified as the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. Happened. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video so you don't miss out on other fun and informative history videos. See you in the next episode.